Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. And we know Halloween that has come and gone, but we've got one more entry in our series on demons and the supernatural world of ancient Israel. Today we're going to look at a figure named Azazel, and a practice from the Old Testament that gave us a word we still use today, the scapegoat. And we want to note that in this video, we're only going to look at Azazel as it would have originally been understood by the authors and the original readers of Leviticus. And we recognize there is a long occult tradition, as well as traditions in Second Temple literature about this figure. But we won't be covering those today. We aren't indulging in a discussion of the occult, so if that's why you're here, you're going to be disappointed. We still hope you'll watch, though. Today, we're going to look at Azazel in light of ancient Near Eastern traditions and worldview. The scapegoat ritual and the figure of Azazel in the Old Testament are found in Leviticus chapter 16. This is a ritual that was to take place one day a year on the holiest day in the Israelite calendar, the Day of Atonement. This was an incredibly important day for the maintenance of the ritual purity of the tabernacle or temple. When intentional or unrecognized sins were committed by the community, they defiled the sanctuary. So the sanctuary needed to be regularly purged of that defilement. If the sanctuary grew too polluted by sin, it could drive away the divine presence and the source of Israel's blessing. So the stakes in this ritual were very high. The ritual which remedied all this and how it was to be performed are detailed in part in Leviticus 16, verses 6 to 10. This is the text. We'll read from the New International Version, as it's one of the more common translations that people use. It says, "Aaron is to offer the bull for his own sin offering to make atonement for himself and his household. Then he is to take 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He is to cast lots for the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. Aaron shall bring the goat whose lot falls to the Lord and sacrifice it for a sin offering. But the goat chosen by lot as the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to be used for making atonement by sending it into the wilderness as a scapegoat." Now, did you catch where Azazel is? And if you didn't, that's okay. This translation from Hebrew to English obscures it, but that doesn't mean that the NIV is a bad translation or anything like that. Here's the text of the New American Standard Translation, one of the more literal translations of the Bible. You can see it's pretty close to the NIV, and there's still no reference to Azazel. Now look at the New Revised Standard Version. Here you can see the translators have just transliterated the Hebrew word Azazel, while the other translations translated it as scapegoat. Rather than interpreting Azazel to mean scapegoat, they chose to transfer the sounds of the Hebrew word to their equivalent English letters, leaving the word Azazel as it appears in the original text. So, why are these translations different? Well, it has to do with the understanding of what Azazel is, the scapegoat ritual, and its Near Eastern context.
First, let's look briefly at the scapegoat ritual. The passage we read from Leviticus is the Israelite version of this ritual, which is one part of a larger Israelite atonement ritual that takes place on one day of the year. On that day, the high priest goes before God and offers sacrifice on behalf of the people. Before that is this scapegoat ritual, where the high priest first makes an offering for his own sins, and then he takes 2 otherwise equal goats and casts lots. This was a common way of determining the will of the divine in the ancient world, and we see it all throughout the Old Testament. The text says that one lot would fall for the Lord, or for Yahweh, and the other for Azazel. The goat that was chosen by Lot, and therefore by God, would be taken and sacrificed as a sin offering. The other goat was driven out into the wilderness to Azazel, or for Azazel. Now, it's important to note that in Hebrew, prepositions can be affixed to the beginning of a word rather than being a separate word like we have in English. Here we see a preposition affixed to both the words Yahweh and Azazel, and this preposition can mean either 2 or 4. And that may seem pedantic. We're not above being pedantic, but it makes a big difference here. Is the goat driven to the wilderness to Azazel, or is it driven to the wilderness for Azazel? And what difference does that make? This ritual is actually known in other forms in the ancient world. Texts from the site of Ebla in Syria, dating back to the 24th century, or over 4,000 years ago, describe a similar ritual, though there are important differences. The Greeks practiced a similar scapegoat ritual, and these were a kind of elimination ritual, wherein something that causes contamination or pollution, like sin, is transferred onto the goat in order to physically remove it from the community. Scholars have theorized that this kind of scapegoat elimination ritual originated in southern Anatolia or northern Syria and spread from there to Greece and Israel, among other places. Now, this would explain why similar rituals appear in very different places with very different religious traditions. But all that doesn't answer who or what Azazel is. Most scholars see Azazel as a demon. In the text, Yahweh and Azazel are paralleled. A goat is given to each of them. Since the name Yahweh is used here and is paralleled with Azazel, many see Azazel as a name as well, rather than a generic term like scapegoat. The wilderness, the place where Azazel clearly resides in the text, was a place associated with malevolent supernatural forces in Israel and the wider ancient world. Jewish interpreters and writers also understand Azazel as a demon, or at least a malevolent supernatural personality. In Second Temple literature, like 1st Enoch, Azazel appears as not just any demon, but a chief of demons. Some have even suggested the name means something like fierce god or angry god, and no one's quite sure what the name Azazel actually means, so other suggestions include mighty one of El is strong, or even mighty goat. Okay, so some of that needs unpacking. First, let's look at the wilderness as a place of demons. The scholar Hayim Tawil surveyed Mesopotamian literature and showed that in Mesopotamian demonological texts, malevolent spirits were believed to come up from the underworld through fissures and cracks in the earth. And once they had entered our world, they most frequently lived in the steppe land, or the desert, which is often called the wilderness in the Hebrew Bible. Mesopotamian incantations and magical texts tell magical practitioners and exorcists how to drive demons out of human environments and back to the desert where they belong. Tawil demonstrates that the language of Leviticus 16 and even the later texts that discuss Azazel, like 1st Enoch, are influenced by the language of Mesopotamian demonological and exorcism texts. In 1st Enoch, Azazel is something like the commander of Satan's armies, or maybe even equated with Satan himself. In one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Azazel is the leader of the angels that sinned in Genesis 6, that weird story about the sons of man who sinned with human women and made the Nephilim. That story is incredibly important for the development of Judeo-Christian ideas about angels and demons, and it features prominently in Second Temple literature about the subject. But for now, all we'll say is that by this period, Azazel was thought to be the leader of the group of Watchers in Genesis. All this evidence together is why most scholars see Azazel in Leviticus 16 as a personal name of a supernatural entity that resided in the desert. This figure is opposed to Yahweh, and earlier interpreters understood Azazel to be not only a demon, but a leader among demons. And it's not clear what the name means, as it is only attested in the Bible here in Leviticus, but various meanings have been suggested which are characteristic of divine names. So, if in the scapegoat ritual in Leviticus 16, Azazel appears as a personal name of a malevolent supernatural figure opposed to Yahweh, why does that matter? If Azazel in Leviticus 16 is a named demon or supernatural personality, it makes a significant difference in how we understand this passage. Are the Israelites sacrificing a goat to a demon as well as one to Yahweh? Leviticus 17 condemns sacrificing se'arim, which are generally thought to be a kind of goat demon. And the presence of this text indicates that the Israelites did sacrifice to goat demons. Otherwise, why would it be banned? So, is that what we see in Leviticus 16? A sanctioned sacrifice to a demon? No, that is decidedly not what is happening. But you'd be forgiven if that's your first conclusion you draw when you read Leviticus 16 with the understanding Azazel is an actual demon. We'll get to why in just a minute, but I do want to give a caveat that not all scholars see Azazel as a named demon. Judith Blair argues that Azazel is not a demon per se, but her conclusion is a bit of splitting hairs. She suggests Azazel is not a demon with agency, which stands in opposition to Yahweh, instead arguing that the Azazel figure would not have been understood as an actual demon, but as a symbolic force opposed to Yahweh. She quite rightly states that Yahweh dwells in the very center, the Holy of Holies. Azazel's place is on the outside, the desert. Yahweh's dwelling place is pure. The desert is where all impurities can be found. Worshipping Yahweh brings life to his people. Following other gods brings death to them. Yahweh establishes order, and Azazel is the bringer of chaos. Blair sees Azazel as something like a personification of chaos that is opposed to Yahweh's order. But I don't know that this perspective is mutually exclusive with seeing Azazel as an actual demonic force, which is likely how the original Israelite scribes would have understood this figure. Even one of the most ardent opponents to seeing Azazel as an animated demonic force still sees it as a named personification of opposition to Yahweh, which is awfully close to a demon. And it's clear that in Israel's cosmic geography, which shared significant overlap with their neighbors, the wilderness or desert was a place of chaos. It was associated with the land of the dead and was thus where demonic or malevolent spiritual beings dwelled. And this cosmic geography is what gives the scapegoat ritual its force. The wilderness is where chaotic, evil forces reside. Jacob Milgram states of the scapegoat ritual that elimination rites are therefore employed to drive the demons from human habitation and back to the wilderness, which is another way of saying the demons are driven back to their point of origin. Thus, in Israel, the goat for Azazel bearing the sins of Israel, though it is bound for the wilderness, is in reality returning evil to its source, the netherworld. The scapegoat ritual in Leviticus 16 is not the high priest giving a sanctioned sacrifice to a demon, but rather Azazel was getting what belonged to him, sin. The Israelites were sending their collective sin and guilt to the wilderness where demonic forces of chaos resided and could take what belonged there, far from the presence of the ordering God Yahweh. There's one more note on this we'd like to make about the nature of demons in Israelite teaching. Mary Douglas is an anthropologist who has studied Leviticus, and she notes that if Azazel is a reference to a demon, which we argue it is, then it's the only one in Leviticus. This is significant because demons were used to explain all kinds of misfortunes that befell people in the ancient world, but Leviticus largely ignores them. There are no rituals or sacrifices prescribed in Leviticus for exorcism or other relief from demonic attack in the way we see exorcism texts from other cultures. She notes that Leviticus separated the theory of impurity from belief in demons and classified impurity as a form of lèse-majesté, an attack on God's honor as the covenanted Lord of the people of Israel. While misfortunes may come, the people of Israel would be safe if they adhered to the rules and rituals of purity.
It's this distinction that I think is the big takeaway from this topic, and probably from this series as a whole. The supernatural world of ancient Israel was populated by a vast array of beings, both benevolent and malevolent, that we often miss when we read the Bible today. Learning to see where this world is lost in translation can help us better understand the biblical text and the world from which it came. Now, at the same time, we also see that, at least according to the officially transmitted traditions in the Bible, the Israelites believed that all these forces were subject to the authority of Yahweh. The benevolent forces were agents of Yahweh, and the malevolent forces, while opposed to Yahweh, were incapable of prevailing over him. Malevolent forces were also not an excuse for the sins of the people. They remained accountable for the sin that accumulated in the community, and it was this polluting sin that was sent back where it came from in the scapegoat ritual. The offering of the scapegoat was not to appease Azazel, but to cleanse the people. And we can take this as a good reminder that even in this season, when we are perhaps more aware of the supernatural world, the Bible always points us back to God and to God's relationship with God's people. Now, ultimately, God has authority over this relationship, and the people have their responsibility for maintaining it. So while the Israelites believed in a wide variety of supernatural forces and beings, their ultimate concern was with maintaining this relationship with God, because if they did that, no other powers could overcome them. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future videos. If you learned something new today, take a minute to share this video with your friends. And until next time, keep digging.